Thompson from the State Board, the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. And a few housekeeping things before we get started. The live captions are available, and you can access those through a bit.ly link, and I think Monique will also paste that in the chat. But the link to view the live captions is bit.ly/SBCTC live. That's all lowercase. And that's a great option. If your audio cuts out midway through, you can pop open the chat, the live captions, and follow along that way. And here we go. There's a call-in option available if you're having audio problems. So someone had mentioned their audio wasn't working. And that phone number is 415-655-0002. And the access code is 926-162-149. And if you have any troubleshooting problems, you'll want to either post in the chat to everyone so that Monique can see it, or you can email Monique at mbelair, B-E-L-A-I-R, @sbctc.edu. And as Monique just said, the chat questions will be addressed at the end. I have my chat pane closed because I'll get a little distracted if I have that running. So we'll try to address your questions at the end. And let me go ahead and which monitor I have. Again, I want to remind people to turn off the video if you can. So it looks like Agnes, Jason, Kelly, Rachel, there's a few of you who have video running. That can sometimes just bog things down. So it's helpful if you turn that off. And let's see. Right, Monique, you've already got record going. So I'm going to share my screen. And what we're going to be talking about today is email accessibility. And the majority of the presentation is going to be focused on Microsoft Outlook. And that's because I think most of us in higher ed and government agencies are using Outlook as our email client. And so we'll walk through some of the features in Outlook, but do keep in mind that some of these practices will translate over into other email clients, some won't. For instance, if you use Gmail, there's certain features that aren't available. But there's some general tips that you can apply regardless of which email client you're in. So to start, the important thing that I want to kind of talk about is kind of not using image-based emails. And that's one of the biggest problems that we see when it comes to inaccessible emails. And what I mean by image-based emails is when someone creates kind of a really beautiful poster with all of this, lovely information within the poster, and then they save it as an image, and they just paste that image into the body of an email, and they send that. And so while visually it might be really appealing, when you have a lot of information that's housed within an image, you are preventing your viewer from accessing that information. And so I have a quick example that I want to show you. Here's an email I made that, about these webinars, and I took, an image of a cat sitting at a computer, and then I put text on top of that image. It just says SBCTC Accessibility Webinars, and it lists the dates and topics of each webinar, and then it says join us 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. And underneath the image, I have a link that says register here. And that's where people could click to go and register for the webinars. And while visually I like this email, I'm a fan of cat pictures, this wouldn't be very accessible, because what would happen is that because I didn't put alt text in this image, and frankly there's just too much text on the image to house it within alt text, If someone's using a screen reader or text-to-speech technology, then what they're going to get is, something like picture 1, register here. And that's not very helpful. They don't know what they're going to be registering for. And so we want to avoid emails like this. And sadly, it's kind of the common approach for events or, kind of more exciting type emails. Register for this conference, attend this event, here's, an office party. That's most often when I tend to see these emails. And so what you would actually want to do, and the reason I know you can check that if there's alt text available or not, I'm just going to pretend like I'm going to forward this email. And when I right-click on the image and select Format Picture, I can see in the Alt Text tab that there's nothing there. This is also really common if someone sends an image like this and I check on my phone. A lot of times images will break and I can see that there's no alt text. Instead, I'll see, picture 001.jpg, which tells me nothing. And so there's a lot of cases where it's not just a case of someone using assistive technology, but a number of people block images from being displayed automatically in their email. And so there's a variety of people who might not be getting the information that you're trying to convey if it's all housed within an image. That's not to say you can't make pretty images. You can, but what I would recommend is get all of the text into the email body and then present the image below it or present the image or the poster as an attachment. But as we've talked about in all the past webinars, text is the most accessible format, and so that's what you want to start with, that's what you want to lead with when you're crafting emails. And here's another email. I made this as an example. It's pretty awful, where I set an image as the background, and then I typed on top of it. And this is, for one, it's just ugly. It's really, really ugly. It's hideous. It's an image of a very bright sunset with a palm tree, and then I have text on top. And in certain parts where the text falls on top of a dark portion of the screen, I made the text lighter colored so that there'd be a little bit more contrast. But there's also text that's, in different colors and highlighted, and just really poor contrast. All in all, it's just really terrible, and it's something you want to avoid. And what's really interesting is, and I'm on the desktop version of Outlook right now, but when I look at this email in the web app version, that image is stripped out entirely. And what happens is the way I formatted my text stays the same. And so now I have some very light text, a very light gray on top of a white background. And so even, with that image breaking, it still doesn't make my email any better. It's still pretty bad. So again, just please avoid using images as the background for anything in an email. Just try to keep it simple and clean. So, main point, do not send image-based emails. All right, so I'm trying to just kind of highlight the points as I go so that you can follow along on the screen. And if you're using Outlook, the next thing that you want to do for all of your emails is make sure your default text format is HTML. And the reason we want to do this is that if you're using plain text, you're not going to be able to format lists or use descriptive hyperlinks. Some of those features that we use to make something more accessible, all of that formatting gets stripped out if you're using plain text. If you're using rich text, some of that formatting can break. I see this especially with images. where the image won't come over if using rich text, or it breaks when you go to reply or forward the email. And so using HTML as your default format will just help to ensure that you have that kind of background coding that makes the content kind of more accessible and more navigable. So you can determine which setting you're on when you kind of go to compose a new message and you go to format text. And right now I have in my format pane, HTML is the one that's selected, or it's shaded. So that's just a quick way to find out kind of what your setting is. But if we want to actually go in and set it so that it's HTML every time and you don't have to change it, then we can go into the File pane. I'm going to go Alt-F, and then Options, just T. And under Mail, one of the first options we have here is Compose Messages. And it says Compose Messages in this format, and that's where you can select HTML. Again, that's what we want you to select, but you can, if there is a reason, you know, rich text and plain text are there as well. But I'm going to keep it at HTML and encourage all of you to do the same, and then hit OK. And so that's just, you know, again, making sure that you don't have to change the format every time you go to compose an email. All right. So the next few tips for creating accessible emails are going to be the same that we used in Microsoft Word. And that's because Outlook is an Office product, so it has a lot of the similar, a lot of the same tools. Some are a little bit different, and that will help you just in terms of consistency. So if you know how to make an accessible Word document, then you're just going to apply the same lessons to Outlook, and it's all pretty simple. There is some inconsistency, I will say, between the desktop version and the web app. So I do have the web app version open to show you a few things there, because it's a little frustrating how inconsistent they are, even with this first rule. So if you've attended the past few webinars, you know that headings are vital to accessibility. And with email, if you're just writing, you know, a short email to someone or, you know, a standard letter, then headings aren't really necessary. But if you're doing kind of a much larger informational email where you have sections of text, then this is where you'd want to use headings. And if you can see my screen, you see that I'm on the Format Text tab, which is Alt-O if you're using keyboard commands. And there's the Styles pane, which is, again, just like Word. The editor up here is pretty much identical to Microsoft Word. And so I have access to all of my headings for creating an accessible email. And you can still use the keyboard shortcuts if you navigate to the text that you want as heading 1. Then you can just do Control-Alt-1 for heading 2, Control-Alt-2, heading 3, Control-Alt-3, and so on. And what I'm going to do, I actually have an email that I wanted to send yesterday, but I was at home because it was a holiday, and I was using the web app version of Outlook, and that version does not allow me to add in headings. So I have my email ready to go, and I'm just going to strip out all the stuff for forwarding the email. This is just a little accessibility newsletter that I send out. And what I'm going to do here is go in and add headings, because this is the type of email where I do think headings would really help. Now, what you'll see is I'm on the message, but it's within the reading pane of Outlook, and I don't have a tab for format text. So I could, you know, just do the keyboard shortcuts. You can also right-click, and the styles do appear in the formatting kind of pane that appears when you right-click on the text. But another way to just make sure you have more options is if you pop out the message. I don't know why it works this way. It's not ideal. Then I am given the Format Text tab. And so I have all of those tools that I'm used to having in Word, and I can just go in and format that. So it looks like I need to break a line here. Okay. And so you can just go through, add headings, and what I'll probably end up doing is cleaning this up so it looks the way that I want, because accessibility does not compromise aesthetics. Okay, so again, it's just the same as in Word. I'm going to, modify heading level 1 to be more of a look that I like. I'm just going to actually darken it up and change the font. But these are all of the same lessons that we went over with the Microsoft Word webinar. I might add some spacing here. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit with some of these rules and tips, but you can see I'm deleting out empty spaces, and what I'm doing is using the line and paragraph spacing options to add space after paragraphs. Oh, and it looks like I have a missing link. So we'll save this when we talk about descriptive hyperlinks. All right, so I added headings to the email. Again, pretty simple, same process as you used in Word. And if you are in the Outlook web app, what you can do is build your message in Microsoft Word and use, all of the styles features. I'm going to pull over the web app real quick. And then you can paste it into the message, the body of the message. And you might not have as much control over the look of your email, but it's still better than nothing because we want to prioritize function over aesthetics. Hey, Kathleen, can you turn off your mic? I think you might have just done it. And so that way, if I go to send this email, it's nice because the headings will actually come over. And the way that I can check that, I'm opening up the email as though, oh, where did it go? As though I'm forwarding it. Actually, I need to be back in the desktop version. Pop this out so I can get that Format Text tab. And now when I click on the title, the CTC Access February newsletter, I see that heading 1 is selected. And look at the first article, Listserv Love, and heading 2 is selected. So all of that came over, even though I was using the web app, where there's no real ability to add headings. But since we're dealing with 2 Office products, the nice piece is that the formatting I do in Word carries over when I just paste it into an email in the web app. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do in our emails is add alt text to our images. And again, this is a lot like we did in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. We're going to get to the image, and you can right-click and select Format Picture, or that's Shift F10 and the letter O. And then in the Layout and Properties tab, we can type our descriptive alt text into the description pane. So I have the kind of SBCTC logo on the screen, and I'm just going to do SBCTC logo as my alt text. And then we can close out of that. And someone actually in our Accessibility 101 course just today was asking about adding alt text to their email signature. I guess they have an image in there. And I've seen that a lot where in people's email signatures, they might have the logo of their college or agency. A number of people at the state board have, the star logo next to their signature. And in that case, this is again where it's frustrating. In the signature box in Outlook, there's not a way to add alt text to your signature. I'll open my signatures. I did a test one here where I have a picture of a cat with sunglasses on, a cool cat. And unfortunately, there's no way, when I right-click, there's no option to format the picture. If I do Shift F10, same deal. I'm not finding any way to add alt text. So the trick here is, just like I talked about earlier, is you format it in Word. You pick, kind of whatever image you're using, type out all the text, all of that, and then you paste it into your signature box. And when you save it, it'll actually carry over the alt text and whatever other structure you might have built in. So there's some weird kind of wonky workarounds that you have to deal with. Outlook's not quite as sophisticated as Word, but at least there are some workarounds. And if it doesn't work, if you can't do that, if you're using an email client that doesn't allow you to add alt text, then I would question if it really needs to be an image. I've seen a number of vendors where underneath their name, I just get a broken image. And I don't know if that's contact information that's supposed to be displaying, if it's, again, their company logo. I'm not sure what's supposed to go in there because they haven't provided any alt text. And so it's, sometimes your email reader might just be lost if you can't put that alt text in. So keep that in mind. Okay. And the next few kind of tips are, again, all the same as we talked about in Word and in PowerPoint. You want to use formatted lists in an email if you are, presenting a list. And so you select that text, and then under the Message tab, which is Alt-H, you can select Bullet for bullet point list. That's going to be the keyboard Command U. And actually in Outlook, you can also do N for a numbered list. So that's Alt-H and then U or N. That was something Word doesn't have as a keyboard command for the numbered list. So it's kind of nice that Outlook has it. And sorry if I'm speeding through this. I just feel like I'm repeating myself from the past webinars. Hopefully most of this sounds pretty familiar to you as well. You want to use descriptive hyperlinks rather than pasting URLs right into your email message. And let's pop back over to that newsletter. I was missing a descriptive hyperlink. Here we go. Oh, is the link there? Looks like when I hover over it, it says Control-click to follow the link. It does look like it's there, but it appears like normal text, so it looked like the link was broken, but we'll pretend like it was broken. So to insert that descriptive hyperlink, Get rid of my highlighter. Here. Okay. Oh, I just keep clicking the wrong button when I don't need to. All right, so I'm going to highlight the text and then right-click and select. Actually, we'll just remove the hyperlink so I can show you this the right way. Select that text and then right-click or Shift F10 and then select hyperlink to the H. And you paste the hyperlink into the address bar or type it in and click OK. So I'm just going to maybe bold that to make it look like the other hyperlinks in the email. Make that Calibri. Okay. I started obsessing over this, sorry. There we go. Now it looks like the others. And so again, same process as what you would have done in Word to build in that descriptive hyperlink. Okay. Other things, make sure that you use good color contrast. So we want to use dark colors on a light background. Try to avoid using, light colored text. And part of this ties into the next point, which is remove any background design or theme. And to show you what I mean, some people have backgrounds set up in their emails. So on the screen is an email with this kind of purple striped background. And it looks really busy. It's annoying. And I think could pose problems for people trying to read an email, especially if this email had a lot of text on it. And I've seen a few different backgrounds that I personally have a hard time reading text on top of. And the way that people kind of set those themes is you go into File, Alt-F, and then Options. And let's see, there we go. I'm in Mail. And it's the fourth item down, use stationery. I'm going to go into the stationery and fonts pane. And this is also, you can access it through your email signature. Personal stationery is the other tab over. And the first item is theme. And you can kind of click through and see there's some themes that are okay. There's some, like this one of teddy bears, that might not be very good, that might make it really hard to read on top of. Some still allow decent contrast, but again, if you click through, you'll see that there's a number of these that are just kind of awful. So you want to make sure that you avoid those. And in general, I just recommend not using a theme, keeping your email, simple, clean. That's going to be the best approach. Why Microsoft builds these in, I have no idea. Just because you can do something, though, doesn't mean you should. So that's one of the things to remember. I'm going to close out of there. And the next piece I want to talk about is just avoid using spaces to create visual alignment. And you saw me kind of clicking through the newsletter, changing up some of the spacing. And again, this is pretty simple to do. Under the Format Text tab, Alt-O, in the Paragraph group, you can select the line and paragraph spacing, which is once you do that, Alt-O, letter K. And that's where you can, if you want to space after a paragraph, you can add space after a paragraph, add space before a paragraph. In the line spacing options, you can set it so that consistently, maybe you have 6-point font space, or excuse me, 6-point space after each line. And that can just kind of help space things out nicely without building in a bunch of extra blank spaces. So that's just one way to kind of maintain control over the look of your email. And then I want to talk about a few resources that are available for accessible emails. In some cases, you have an accessibility checker. We went on a little hunt for it before this webinar. I actually do not have the accessibility checker. I'm using Outlook 2016. I'm a little confused why it's missing, but it should be under the review tab. So that would be the first place to look if you're using Outlook. In the web app, if I'm composing an email, up in the menu where I can select send, attach, or discard, if I select more options, I'm given the check for accessibility issues, and this will open the accessibility checker, and it will scan my email to see if there's any problems. So in this case, it's saying there are no issues. And again, I'm not certain, we could not track it down in the desktop version where that checker is, but it should be available for Outlook 16. So hopefully it's just something with our domain, and hopefully you all have access to it. But another thing I wanted to point out, which I just recently learned about, and you can kind of see on my screen in an email that I'm composing to myself. So I'm trying to mimic, if anyone was about to send me an email, what would happen? There's a notice up at the top that says, Jess Thompson prefers accessible content, and then it says check for accessibility issues. So this is pretty cool, because if there's someone else in my agency who's using the web app, if they go to send me an email, then they'll get this little notice before they send the email that says, I prefer accessible content, and so then they're prompted to run that accessibility checker. And that's just a neat feature that's available. But again, it's only available on the web app. It's not available on the desktop version. So one of those annoying inconsistencies between the different versions of Outlook, but a feature that I was excited to come across nonetheless. And in order to enable that feature, when you're in the web app, you go up to Settings in that top menu, and under your app settings, select Mail, and under General are the accessibility settings. And this is where you can check off Ask Senders to Send Content That's Accessible. And I thought that was just really cool. In part, it's just a way to bring awareness to accessibility and remind people that accessible email is part of this as well. So unfortunately, though, they have to be using the web app to see it. But that's something that you can enable, and hopefully people will get the message and respond positively to the message. So let's go back. So that's all that I have for you with accessible email. Again, not all email clients are going to have these features, but generally they'll have some, maybe not all of them. And it's very similar to the lessons on Microsoft Word accessibility. And it's really just kind of common sense. Just everything we talked about in Word, you want to do the same for email. So I'm going to pop over to see what chat messages or chat questions were asked. Okay, so the first question, I see that Jess is using the desktop client instead of the web client. Is it better to use the desktop client? So as you can see, there's pros and cons to each. The desktop client is nice in terms of having the headings available right on hand. So I feel like I have a little bit more control for editing, or excuse me, marking up my email as needed in the desktop client. But again, I kind of like that the web app allows me to put that notification on that I prefer accessible content. In my case, I have, you know, the accessibility checker in the web app, but not in my desktop version. But again, that might just be me. It's really odd that it's not appearing. So, you know, it's up to you. Again, just kind of keeping in mind that there's pros and cons to each. I find in general that I have a little bit more control over my emails with the desktop version. Okay, next question. What sort of label would be used if you were addressing someone in the email like, "Good afternoon, Mr. Smith"? So in a standard email where I was just, you know, maybe I'm answering this person's question and, or here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna compose an email to Monique. If I was going to write Monique an email, I put, you know, the subject line in there, thanks. Hi, Monique. Thanks for your help during the webinar. I really appreciate it. This is, you know, just kind of like a letter, so this isn't something where you need headings. It's communication where you kind of need the person to read all the way through. And so when you're writing a letter, and, excuse me, and corresponding this way, there's not so much a need for headings, but if you're doing something like the newsletter, for instance, where I'm sending that out and it's a digest of different articles. And so people get the title of the article, they get, you know, like the first paragraph, and then they're given a link, continue reading the article. For this, I built in headings because it's okay if someone jumps ahead. It's not communication that needs to be read, you know, from the start all the way through.
Hey, Jess, I'm going to jump in real quick. I lost host,
yeah.
And I can't mute everyone, and I can hear someone is tapping away.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Let me.
I kicked out and had to come back in. Apologize.
Let me get my participants back open. Sorry. I saw a note that you got kicked out, but I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. And Janelle, I think your audio is on. If you could mute yourself, please.
Here we go. Okay, Monique, you should be host now.
Okay. Oh, I don't. Maybe am I listed twice? Because I don't see that I'm a host. Oof.
Do it again. Okay. You have it?
I think I have it now. Thank you.
Okay. I just lost. Am I share? Can you all see my screen?
We can see your screen. Thanks, Jess.
Okay, I can't see my screen.
Oh, no.
Oh, goodness. How do I get out of this? This is too funny. I need you all to tell me how to navigate my screen. Okay, let me just stop. There. Okay, weird. Now I can see my screen. So in certain cases, something like a newsletter where you've got chunks of information and it really is different sections, then headings would be useful. But if you're just doing, you know, kind of standard communication to someone, you know, I think the problem with emails is that sometimes people don't read them all the way through. We want people to make sure that they're reading all the way through. And so sometimes headings aren't necessary. So I hope that answered the question. But I wouldn't label anything, you know, where you're saying, "Good afternoon, Mr. Smith." You know, "Hi, Monique" is just normal text. All right. So can you create a document in Word and copy and paste it into email? Will it keep the format? Yes. That's one of the nice things with Word and Outlook, both being Office products. It will carry over. So with the web app, where you're unable to add headings to anything, and so I have an email open. Oh, actually, here we go. Wait, where am I? This is not the web app. I'm getting myself lost here. Here we go. I have an email open. I can format my text in terms of choosing the font and the size, making it bold. I can make it different colors. I can add, a bulleted list or a numbered list, and I can kind of control the spacing and alignment. But there's no way for me to add headings. So if I was sending that newsletter from the web app, then what I would want to do is I'd want to format it in Word first and then paste it in. And when I paste it in, that formatting will come with it. So again, trying to remember some of those workarounds depending on which version you're using. The next question is, would it be possible to get information about accessible emails through non-Microsoft products like Gmail? I can tell you with Gmail that it's limited. And I'm not going to open my personal Gmail up to demonstrate, but with Gmail, you aren't given the ability to add headings. I don't even know if you can do alt text for images in Gmail. I'm thinking that you might not be able to. Sorry, I'm just testing real quick. But there's going to be, some features that you want to kind of keep in mind in terms of the kind of color contrast and whatnot. But yeah, it's looking like you can't do alt text on images in Gmail. You can't do headings. So you're going to have limitations in certain clients. I'm not going to be able to tell you how to work with different clients because my knowledge is limited on Outlook and Gmail. I'm also not, I don't consider myself an Outlook super user. I kind of do some standard emails, but nothing super fancy. So some of that you'll want to research on your own. Google is a great resource. All right, and then is it okay to use bullet points was the next question, or do they require alternative text? So as long as you're putting bullet points in using the formatting tools provided, let's see, I'm gonna make a bulleted list in my email to Monique. So I wrote, I'm especially grateful for monitoring the chat, troubleshooting. And so you can see these bullet points are coming over. I have a formatted list. And if Monique were using a screen reader when she reads this email, it would let her know, there's 3 list items so that she'd, again, just as we talked about in Word, she'd be able to kind of know the context of that list. The bullet points themselves are there as list formatting. They're not there as an image. So again, try to make sure you're using the formatting tools in Outlook or whichever client you're using. If you're using images to create those kind of bullet points, that's kind of problematic. So, all right, any tips, differences between Outlook for Windows and Outlook for Mac? I don't know. I don't have Outlook on my Mac. So that's another great question for Google. Let's see, how is the vertical key line between elements in your signature read by a screen reader? So in my signature, I've got, it has like the address 1300 Quince Street Southeast, and there's a vertical line that says P.O. Box 42495, vertical line. I'm not sure how it's read by a screen reader. Good question. Let's see, will a correctly formatted newsletter hold its formatting when forwarded and minor changes made? If you're using HTML, this is what I've found the problem with rich text formatting to be. If you do the rich text formatting, then sometimes when you go to forward it, I know at least with the alt text and images will break. I'm not sure about heading levels, if they break. Let's see, I'm just gonna test it out real quick. This is, oops, goodness. You can see how I answer a lot of your questions. I run a quick test. So, okay, we've got rich text. I'm going to send it to myself. And if I go to forward that email, I'm going to pop it out again so I can see the format text pane. It looks like heading 1 stayed, heading 2 did as well. So some of it comes over, but again, images, that's what I've seen break if using rich text format. The alt text will break. So I recommend keeping to that HTML format just to ensure it doesn't break. All right, and then the next question. I found when I copy and paste from Word to the web app, the 12-point font is much larger in the email text of the email. So I select a smaller font in Word so it's not as large in the email body. Perhaps I'm doing something here that is wrong. Anyone else have that issue? So I don't know if there were other responses in the chat to that. In general, when you paste into the email client, you can check the font size. I think my default font is around 11, but I also have my screen, my font zoomed in right now, just for the sake of this webinar. So right now it's 12 point, but I've just magnified it. So hopefully you'll get some responses in the chat around that. And then another question, I tried to put alt text on logo and email signature, but it doesn't show as a pic. Okay. I'm not sure what to tell you without being beside you to see what's happening, but you might need to play around a little bit more. And then will this information be available in another format after the webinar? So just as I do with other webinars, I'll be sending out actually the email that we worked through that had the list of things to keep in mind with the keyboard shortcuts for some of those actions. And I will also provide additional resources from the web, things that I use, so that you don't have to just rely on me, because there's tons of great resources out there. And then someone asked for information from past webinars. So you'll have to send me an email, and I can send you the follow-up emails with the recordings and resources from the past webinars if you tell me which ones that you need. That would be helpful for me. So otherwise, good luck writing emails. Again, just try to keep it simple. Don't get too fancy. Usually when we get fancy is when we start breaking stuff. I think I saw a question pop up on chat about headings. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can open the chat screen. Yeah, headings can be different colors, but again, just make sure you do have good contrast and don't use color to convey meaning. So don't use color alone anyways. So same lessons as we talked about in Word apply here. So it's all a little redundant, but that's good because then it just means the same practices all around. So I will be sending out the recording and resources as soon as I can. I think I mentioned last time YouTube is flagging all of my recordings when I upload them. So delays things a little bit. Apparently YouTube does not approve of content promoting accessibility. So in the meantime, maybe we'll see you all next week. I think next week is going to be a really tough webinar on PDF accessibility, intro to Adobe Acrobat, which is, I'm just going to warn you, is not fun, but we'll get through it together. So, all right, you all have a good rest of your day, and thanks for your dedication to accessibility.